Hello everyone, I'm Eshan Pokhrel, and welcome back to the People Political Podcast. Today I talked to Matthew Hoh, the presumptive Green Party Senate candidate from North Carolina. Mr. Hoh has been the subject of national attention recently as the state Democratic Party in North Carolina has taken measures to remove the Green Party from the ballot in the November elections in an attempt to flip the Republican-held seat of retiring Senator Richard Burr. Don't forget to subscribe to the PB Political Podcast on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you can find podcasts. Give us a 5-star rating. We'd greatly appreciate it. And also follow our Instagram and Twitter accounts at PBPoliticalAL. Thank you and enjoy the episode. Welcome to the show, Mr. Hoh, Matthew Hoh. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me here.
So, before we hit the top line with the obvious issues of the ballot removal and all of the controversy around that, let's get into a little bit about your campaign, why you decided to run for Senate, and let alone for a third party.
Yeah, I think there's multiple reasons to do this. I was asked to do this by the Green Party, and I'm a first-time political candidate, although I've been involved in issues of policy and activism for quite a while now. I was in the Marine Corps for 10 years with the State Department. I was in the wars. I've been part of a think tank. I've been part of organizations both on the street and as a member of their boards that have been particularly focused on anti-war and human rights issues, but also always concerned about what's happening in my communities as well. And I think my decision to run is based upon what I see happening to people that I love. People in my family, friends, people in my neighborhood who are and have been affected by the deliberate policies of our government for decades now, whether those be governments run by Democrats or Republicans. And this ties in, of course, to what I saw with the wars and the injustice and the illegality of the wars overseas and the lack of accountability for them, as well. And then you can tie that into the wars here at home, whether it's the war on drugs or the crime against humanity that's happening at our border, and then of course inaction on the climate, and then we haven't even touched the issues of healthcare, housing, jobs, education.
Yeah, and for people that don't know, because a lot of people have heard the term Green Party, but there's not a lot of real discussion because third parties in the United States are really just held back by the two-party system. Just a little bit about the Green Party. It was founded It's founded in the 90s, late 2000 or early 2000s, 1990s. So there hasn't really been any national success because obviously we've been entrenched in this two-party system, especially post World War II. Outside of some municipal and some state legislation seats, no congressional candidate or national candidate has really made a significant dent in the two-party system. Ralph Nader in 2000, I believe, had the most popular. I think that really launched it into prominence a little bit. I think he had over 3% of the vote, which is impressive for a third party. So just given that, and obviously there's a little bit more discontent with the two-party system recently. There's a Hill poll on April that said 58% of the country would back a third-party candidate behind instead of Trump or Biden. How has North Carolina been? Have they been receptive to the Green Party and you during this campaign?
Yeah. So in order to get on the ballot, we had to go out there and get signatures to petition to be on the ballot. And so we talked to tens of thousands of people. And the response is pretty overwhelming in the support for something different and the support for something, an alternative or something that would change the current status quo. We were met with that type of enthusiasm all across the state. People who have really seen the damage that the two-party structure has done. A two-party structure that's beholden to corporate money, what that's done to working families. And so people understand the need for something different. That the idea of continuing to go on with the system we have is only going to perpetuate. It's actually going to make things worse. So we were met with that throughout the state. Even at partisan locations. Happened that our petitioning effort coincided with the last 2 weeks of our petitioning effort coincided with the early primary voting here in North Carolina. So we were able to go and petition outside of the polling places. And so, literally 3 or 4 minutes after people have just filled out Democratic or Republican primary ballots. We're meeting them in the parking lot, and they're signing our petition to be on the ballot. When I was doing it, again, literally 3 or 4 minutes before, people were filling out ballots indicating which Democrat or Republican they wanted for U.S. Senate, and then they meet me in the parking lot, and they're saying, hey, I'll vote for you in November. So even in a partisan spot like that, we were still meeting with a great deal of enthusiasm for having more options on the ballot, for changing the two-party system, for doing something other than the status quo.
So normally, Democrats are typically the one that Green Party voters, they really align more with Democrats. But how have you seen a little bit more of an even split, or has it been primarily Democrats that have signed your petition, or how has that balance been for you?
We've had people from across the political spectrum sign the petition. I would have conservatives say to me, look, I'm a conservative, you're a socialist, I'm not voting for you in the election, but I think you need to be on the ballot. This idea that we need more options, more choice. The idea that our entire structure can be simplified into two binary choices is just, it's absurd. And there's really no other countries around the world that do it this way. Our first past opposed two-party system, I think there are only 2 other countries in the world that have this type of system. And this is very, very harmful. It's created the conditions that we've had because the political system has been captured by corporations and the banks, by big money. And the result has been, just talk about the last 5 decades of financialization policies that have squeezed all the money out of the working class and squeezing all the money out of the middle class now to ensure that that money goes to the top. And those are policies that both Democrats and Republicans embrace. So we're trying to offer an alternative here. The idea that we're going through this pandemic, where, as the National Academy of Science reported last month, that 1 in 3 COVID deaths were the result of not having health care. So basically 330,000 people were killed by our for-profit healthcare system over the last 2.5 years. The idea that there's not single-payer healthcare on the ballot in North Carolina is inane, right? How can that be? And that's just one issue. We could talk about a whole host of other issues, but this idea that we're not addressing this through our elections, we're supposed to just hope that somehow people who haven't done it before are now going to do it, particularly when the money is against that. Yeah, so the idea of being on the ballot, it means that we represent issues and a constituency that otherwise are not being represented on the ballot.
Yeah, one last thing before we get into the whole ballot controversy and situation around that. A little bit about your campaign, because people, again, when you talk about the Green Party, it's not like a wide issue. We don't really, I feel like a lot of people don't know exactly what the Green Party is. And I think there's 4 key tenets to it. Democracy, I might be butchering this, just correct me. Democracy, environmental protection, stopping forever war or unnecessary war, or all war in general. And I'm blanking on the last one, but I think it's 4 tenets. Is that correct? I might just be saying stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, it's democracy, nonviolence, environment, or ecology, I think we say, and then it's human rights.
Okay, so.
Yeah, and the idea of human rights being, the idea that education, housing, jobs, healthcare, are human rights, as well as what we're often associated with human rights, the idea of First Amendment rights, or right not to be tortured or something like that.
Yeah, those are all, I feel like if you pull those separately, very popular. So why do you think, obviously I guess there's a little bit of because again, people don't really know what the Green Party stands for, I feel like, just as a broad public. So why do you think there is such a tough time getting a little bit, even if you don't win an election, just eating into some independent voters there? Why do you feel like it's such a tough task as a third party?
Well, it's hard to get in front of people, right? It's difficult to get noticed, be heard. We have a political system that's dominated by money. Look, in 2020, the North Carolina Senate elections were $300 million. If you're a grassroots campaign, an independent campaign, a third-party campaign, how do you break into that? How do you crack into that? There's so much money involved that to have a microphone or a megaphone to be heard. It's to go the traditional route, it's just not possible because we don't have hundreds of millions of dollars, right? I mean, so there's that, but there's also we have a two-party system that expands beyond the parties themselves. And this goes into media, and it goes into nonprofits, it goes into activism, it goes into all different layers of our society, our civil society, that is structured for the two parties. And so to break into that is also difficult. And then you have, a lot of kind of myths, a lot of specious arguments against third parties and independents that allow people to hedge. The idea that, you're not polling. What are your poll numbers? Well, how can I have poll numbers if, first of all, if the polling firms don't even put us on the poll? I mean, and then you say, how come we're not on the poll? Well, you're not on the poll because you're not getting any media. Well, how come we're not getting any media? Well, you're not getting any media because you're not on the poll. Because it's very circular, and this applies to money as well. I mean, they will say, I know, say in New Jersey, to be on the debate stage in New Jersey, like in a New Jersey governor's race or something like that, you have to have raised at least $500,000. And the argument is well, if you can't raise that, then you're not viable. But if no one is giving us the airtime, or you're not letting us be in the debates, then how are we ever going to be viable to raise that money? I mean, so it's a very circular reasoning where it allows people to hedge and not support, even though you see, 62% of Americans say they want a third party, a third party, or 85% they say they want major electoral restructuring. You just referenced the poll where 58% said they would vote for someone from a third party rather from Trump or Biden. You have all these types of structural aspects that have been set up because the two-party system has dominated for so long, and that's what we're in the process of trying to undo.
Yeah, so let's get into some of those structural issues, because that's what's made this race so interesting from my perspective as an Alabama voter. Who, I mean, North Carolina's close to us, but we don't really pay attention. Sorry, I mean, it's just, But anyways, about this issue, this is fairly egregious. I just want to run through it a little bit here for everybody that's unaware. And also, if you're unaware, check out our new article about this issue and why it could matter moving forward on pppolitical.com if you want more of this conversation. So your campaign reached the signature threshold, which in North Carolina is 13,865 in the end of May, and the filing deadline was in June. So you had plenty of time. Around that time, a man named Michael Abusovitz, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, filed complaints with the Board of Elections in North Carolina, and he had experience working for the North Carolina Democrats in the past. He cited ballot fraud and signature issues and other legislative issues that are a little bit more complex that I don't think are really matters much. After that, the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, which helps Democrats around the country get elected in Senate races everywhere, was caught impersonating Green Party volunteers. They were sending out texts to petitioners that were asking if they want their names removed off the ballots. One of these people contacted you, not knowing who you were, I'm assuming, and asked that, and you pressed on, according to your Twitter feed. And they said that we can't, this is a quote, "we can't afford to give Republicans more of an advantage," and then asked to remove your name. And then you asked, and they said it's the DSCC. And then last week, I believe it was Thursday, the North Carolina Board of Elections voted 3-2 to remove you from the ballot and the rest of the Green Party, if I'm not mistaken, citing the issues with the election, the missing signature or whatever Mr. Abusowitz brought forward, and all 3 yes votes were Democrats. So, let's just start from the beginning.
Right.
Congratulations. Like, the signatures is a big thing, first thing. 13,000 signatures, 14,000 basically. And you guys have over 16,000 now, I believe, too.
Well,
if not more now.
So we needed 13,865 signatures. If people are not familiar with how the process of petitioning works, you're always going to have signatures that don't count. So what you're trying to achieve is your 13,865 verified signatures. And this is well-known, well-established. Rule of thumb is roughly you collect 4 signatures, only 3 are going to count. That's not just here in North Carolina, across the country. So our requirement was 13,865 verified signatures. We collected more than 22,500 signatures. Of that, nearly 16,000, 15,953 signatures were verified by the county boards of election. We turned those signatures into the counties by their deadlines. We turned in signatures to 96 of 100 North Carolina counties. We then turned in the whole batch of signatures, the 16,000 verified signatures, to the state by June 1st. The state then had to July 1st to certify us, but that's not the only thing that needed to occur by July 1st. What happens is that the state, after the state certify us, we are to hold a nominating convention. Our members have to go and register as Greens with their county boards of elections. The candidates have to go and file for candidacy, etc. So the state receives our signatures on June 1st. By statute, they are to immediately and forthwith certify us, because the counties have already verified our signatures. The state holds on to our signatures for 30 days, conducts an investigation where they're talking about 200 irregularities, which are signatures that were never verified anyway. So it doesn't even count towards the valid signature count. And then they hold the certification hearing on June 30th. So giving us less than 24 hours to do all those other things that we're required to do by that July 1 deadline. So you can see that they were coming into this in bad faith, to begin with. And then at the hearing, we were told that because there are these irregularities, even though over 30 days, and we have fully cooperated with the state, over 30 days, the state had shown no evidence of fraud in a sense of organized fraud or anything like that, let alone those 200 signatures don't count towards our total. But the state's argument then became, because there are these irregularities, and even though we've had these signatures for 30 days and haven't found anything else, but because there are these irregularities, we need more time to investigate. But because tomorrow is July 1st, the deadline, we are not going to certify you. And there is hardly any due process. I should probably say no due process. Our attorney attempted to ask a question. He wanted to know, does any of these signatures count towards the verified total amount? And the chair of the State Board of Elections refused to answer, muted our attorney, turned off his microphone when our attorney tried to follow up. And in line with that, adjacent to that, is this aspect you're talking about with the law firm and the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, the DSCC. The DSCC and the Elias Law Firm, so Mark Elias is the most prominent Democratic attorney. Mark Elias is the most prominent Democratic attorney in the country, arguably. Have been down here since mid-June or so. And what they did is they took our petitions, they got our petitions as part of a public record request, and they said that they were going to check the integrity of the petitions. But as you read the text message, they weren't checking the integrity of the petitions. They were trying to get people to remove their names using political arguments, which there's a whole issue of, is that legal? Can you do that? Take a public record and then use it for your own blatant political purposes. That's not the only problem with that. So what happened was about 2 weeks or so ago, a little more than 2 weeks ago, we started hearing from people saying, hey, someone called me and asked me to take my name off the petition. And then we started hearing from people that the person said they're with you guys. They called and they said they're with the Green Party and they want us to they want me to take my name off the petition. And so we were aware of that. And one of our members, because he was aware of it, was able to capture that on an audio recording where the caller clearly identified themselves as being with the Green Party. They would also at other times say they were with the Democrats. Other times they would say they were the State Board of Elections, and sometimes they would say they wouldn't say who they were with. And then they start sending text messages, and that's what you referred to. I got the text message. We even see issues with the text messages because we've seen some where the person will say, no, I do not want my name taken off the text message. And then the next response is, thank you. You can remove your name from the text message by clicking here, like so, like this twisty, language in the text messaging, trying to trick people into taking their names off, as well as that political argument, that type of, and they were harassing. They were calling people 5-6 times a day. I mean, one person showed me a screenshot where his wife was called 4 times in 3.5 hours by these auto dialers. And then they start showing up at people's homes, including people who had told them, no, I don't want my name taken off the petition. They still showed up at their homes, right? So you had this harassment, you had this bullying, you had this shaming, basically like if you do this, and they would say other things too. I mean, I know this is long and complicated, but it was long and complicated. Yeah. What they would say is that it's okay, the Green Party is already on the ballot, so you can remove your name from this petition safely. And it didn't make any sense, but that's the type of stuff they said to try and trick people. So you had this operation to get people to remove their names from petition using clearly misleading people, lying to them in a deliberately calculated way in order to try and keep us from getting on the ballot. And they have filed that lawsuit through that attorney in Raleigh, but he's just the local counsel of record. The real attorneys for that are the Elias Law Firm in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, so removing your name from if people, because I believe 145 around there, people did remove their names from the ballot for whatever reasons, the pressure or whatever it was. Right. But that doesn't, even if you remove your name, so I guess the play, it must have been just to get 2,000, have 3,000 signatures to get you off the ballot entirely, because it doesn't matter if you signed a ballot. Like I signed a couple independent ballots here for governor, like petitions. And I don't have to vote for them, so it's just like that was just the whole point to get you off the ballot.
That's right. Okay. That's right. And they said that people were deceived, or the whole thing was just absurd. We were out there. One of the arguments is that we were deceiving people, not telling them who we were. And we had our Green Party shirts on, our hats. We were giving out Green Party buttons. We had our banners on our table, all our literature. It says Green Party. Actually, I've got sitting right here by me, like the petition itself, you're not going to see it, but the petition itself, at the top of the petition, it says, a petition for the formation of a new political party to be named North Carolina Green Party. The petition itself is clearly labeled, but what they were doing is just throwing anything out there in order to try and get us to have problems.
Yeah,
right? And trying to just get up this idea of, and it worked for the State Board of Elections because, well, the State Board of Elections didn't use the Elias Law Firm's arguments in denying us. They'll use that later on. We're gonna do everything we can to challenge this, and when we get our spot on the ballot, then I'm sure the Democrats in the Elias Law Firm will then step in and challenge us then, and they'll use this to try and, they don't have to be successful in the sense of just keeping us off the ballot. We're a small grassroots campaign. They can just exhaust us by keeping us in court. Right now, all our money is going towards this, all our time and effort's going to this. I don't have a staff of hundreds of people. I've got a handful of folks. Same with the North Carolina Green Party. And everything we're doing is focused on this, and that's what they want. We're not out there talking about healthcare or jobs or the climate or the wars or, Wall Street or anything like that. We are talking about, basically answering questions all the time. When did you stop committing fraud? So the narrative is being controlled here, right? And that's what they want. That's part of it. This ballot access, the whole thing about getting on the ballot is structured this way. It's meant to keep people out. And this is, again, the two-party system is exclusionary, it's undemocratic, and it's harmful. You have these onerous requirements to collect these signatures, which is a much greater task than people understand. It's very labor intensive, ends up costing you a good amount of money. And so you start your campaign and you spend all your time just trying to get on the ballot. And then when you do, you then have the back end of this, where now you're just dealing with the counties and the state all the time through the verification process, that's fine because but now this last month or so, we've lost, a full month to being able to campaign because and now we're going to lose more because now we have to fight this in court, and so on and so forth. So it's very strategic in its reasons for, how it keeps third-party campaigns, independents, grassroots organizations tied up in this kind of stuff rather than actually out there talking to people and earning their votes.
Yeah, so let's set it up a little bit in the context of this Senate race. So North Carolina has been pretty solidly Republican, at least in the Senate. I mean, of course, your governor is Governor Cooper, who's a Democrat, and he was also the Attorney General for basically the whole 2000 to 2017, I believe. So he's been up there for a while. So he's a Democrat. But on the national side, a lot of both of your senators right now are Democrats. Senator Burr is retiring, open seat. So Ted Budd, representative from NC 13, and Chief Justice Supreme of the North Carolina Supreme Court, Sherry Beasley. I don't know much about her, I must confess, but that's the candidates. The two major candidates, obviously. There's a libertarian candidate.
Also libertarian.
Yeah, but he's not getting the same treatment as the Green Party. That's another issue. We can get into that in a little bit. But yeah, so I'm assuming. I was looking into some of the election stats from 2020, at least presidential election. President Trump, President Biden, and then throwing in Howie Hawkins. Oh my God, someone's cutting the lawn. Sorry for the.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, it's so loud. Oh my God. Okay. Anyways.
Joy of hey, this is the technology, man.
Yeah, that's
We're
true.
able to do this like this, right?
Yeah.
It's great, but there's going to be people outside cutting grass. So
Yeah,
that's all right. My dogs are going to bark soon, probably. So that's all right.
Yeah. So, anyways, 2020, President Trump, President Biden, Howie Hawkins, Green Party candidate. He earned 0.2% of the votes statewide, 12,000 votes around there. So, it wasn't a margin, and this was North Carolina was seen as a battleground in 2020, and I'm assuming it still is on the Senate side. This is why this all is happening for you, but even just on the context of 2020, 12,000 votes wasn't enough to flip the result, and it was a pretty close election. I don't have the exact numbers, but it was a close election. So at a certain point, do you just see do you see that? I'm assuming I'm sure you do, but how unnecessary do you see this whole I guess witch hunt is a word you can use for this, trying to get you off the ballot? Do you really think that Democrats believe that first they have a shot at this seat, which is right now lean Republican, almost at every major election forecast site? And do you think that this is actually something that will actually work in their favor in November?
No, I think it's backfiring against them already. It's giving us attention and that we probably might not be having otherwise. It's also validating. This is the more important thing. It's validating our point about the two-party system. I mean, this is proving everything we're saying. The system has to change. That it's corrupt. It's undemocratic. It's harmful. This is just showing that. So I think that it will. The polling right now on the between Beasley and Budd is it's mainly in Budd's favor. Beasley's gotten a bump recently because of abortion and gun control issues, but my understanding is that the national Democrats were not putting as much into this race as they might necessarily. Now, they showed up right away when we got our signatures in and showed that we were going to be on the ballot. And that is, I think they don't want anyone on the ballot who's going to be speaking to issues of health care, housing, speaking about an annualized living wage, speaking about ending the war on drugs. They don't want people on there who are going to offer a clear alternative on the climate, a whole host of other issues who aren't, beholden to corporate and Wall Street interests, a workers' party, a working families party. They don't want that. That threatens the big money donors of the Democratic Party. It threatens the big money donors of the Republican Party as well. That's why they try and do what they can to keep their small party, the conservative, or we've got this inane horizontal line where we're supposed to define our entire political structure, existence, environment, between left and right. It's totally inane, and I do it. It's very Orwellian, right? In the sense that language dictates how we think, right? And so we're stuck in this. We use these terms left, right, and we're stuck in this binary two-party structure and anything else. So yeah, but the idea of having a party on the ballot that represents people who are not being represented is anathema to the Democratic Party, particularly when these are the people that they've been paying lip service to for decades. And they want those people just to be satisfied with the crumbs that come down to them, and that's it. And to offer those people anything else is, again, anathema. And so it becomes not so much just about North Carolina, but it then becomes about making an example, right? Showing this is what happens if you run against this. We are going to beat you back down. We are going to bring all our best resources down here. We've got way more money than you do. We've got dozens of lawyers we can throw at this, and this was present in the attitude of the chair of the State Board of Elections when they chose not to certify us. His attitude really was, we don't like this, so we're not going to do it. And what are you going to do about it? That type of smug arrogance of power that possesses these people.
Yeah. So two things. One, it's actually even more surprising if you say the Democrats aren't really looking at North Carolina as a competitive pickup. One, I thought they actually would try, but even if they aren't,
there's different. There's been different things about that. How much money the DSCC has been putting into the race has been a subject of discussion. They did not put in a good amount of money back in May after the primaries were over, like the Republicans did, and they've since added some money, but I haven't. We'll know more, when the quarterly reports are out, right?
Yeah.
July 15th, the quarterly report should be out, so we'll have a better idea of how much money they're putting into this race, and they could be putting as much as the Republicans or more, or they could be putting in less, and we just get the feeling that the Democrats had felt that this was a race they weren't going to win. They had cleared the primary out in November. So in November there were 4 Democrats that were kind of running towards the top, and 3 of them dropped out in November. The story is Governor Cooper called them, Chuck Schumer called them, etc., and they were moved to different races in order to just have one candidate. And looking at that, I kind of look at it and say, the future star in that group, Jeff Jackson, who people talk about running for attorney general or for governor, they didn't want him to lose in a Senate race. So they moved him into a House race where it's a gerrymandered district. He's going to win that. So he's got a safe House seat to win rather than being in a Senate race that he might lose, because this is you look at this guy, he is rolled straight out of the politician factory. He looks like the second coming of John Edwards, and he really does. And so my understanding, as I view it, is that they moved him out of the Senate race to protect him because they didn't think this was a race that they could win against a Trump-backed candidate like Bud, who is incredibly uninspiring, does almost no public speaking, is just his whole thing is guns and monster trucks. He's an awful candidate, terrible legislator, does nothing for the people of North Carolina, but he's backed by Trump, so the money's behind him.
Yeah, and I'm mainly signaling out the DSCC's. It makes sense because they're probably focused on Georgia, keeping Senator Warnock in power, flipping Pennsylvania, which they probably will do with Mr. Fetterman, who's a very good candidate. He's a great candidate. And in Ohio, too, that's a pickup. And trying to keep Nevada, that's a big one. Those are the 4 big ones I see. But anyways, I say that just because, if they're, really not involved, it's surprising what they're doing to the Green Party. Just, if they don't see it as a competitive seat, it's just really interesting. Another thing about...
and again, you got to remember, it's national. This is not... Well, North Carolina Democrats are involved, but this is national, so they view this in that light of, we need to make an example of them here in North Carolina, then we can do better at keeping independents and third parties and grassroots campaigns off the ballot in other places.
Yeah.
So, it has national interest.
Yeah, and this whole, issue, this whole whole saga, I guess. I don't even know the best word for it, but I guess I'm assuming Democrats are somewhat threatened by the growth of the Green Party in North Carolina, which, it makes sense with, I'm assuming the Research Triangle, Durham, Raleigh, Chapel Hill, that must be a big area of concern for them. I don't know anything about the region, but I just assume that would be the most progressive area of the state. Is that what you're seeing? Is that where you see the most support in those areas? And is that why you think Democrats are kind of trying to threaten you into...
Well, Democrats have been losing party affiliation quite dramatically here in North Carolina. 20 years ago, they had 48% of registered voters were Democrats, and now it's about 33%. And unaffiliated voters went from 17% 20 years ago to 34% now, and while Republicans stayed flat. So you saw, like, you look at the graph, the chart, and you see like this drop in Democratic affiliation and this rise in affiliate, and that's what we see. And certainly there are more progressive areas of the state, the urban areas, where yes, we have more support there, but we also find that we have a tremendous amount of support in rural areas, because our programs are programs that speak to the people there, that speak to their issues, that speak to the poverty of living and the lack of health care, the lack of, say, broadband internet access. I mean, when we talk about internet, we talk about that as a public utility. And if anyone who doesn't understand that internet is not a that internet is a public utility after the last 2.5 years, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, like, if you don't get that we need internet now, and it's not 1993 any longer. I grew up that way. I mean, this is how we live, and so everyone should have accessible broadband internet as part of, as a public utility, not as something you have to purchase from, a Fortune 500 company. We have that support in the rural areas as well. And we've talked to folks out there. We're greeted with a pretty great degree of enthusiasm. Remember that people move parties. You have those who are stuck in their party, the folks who are partisan, who are committed to watching Fox News every night or MSNBC every night. But you have many who are not. I'm not even talking about the unaffiliated voters here, but many in the parties are not. Because remember that in 2012, 12.5 million Obama voters, in 2016, 12.5 million 2012 Obama voters voted for Donald Trump. 12.5 million. Or they sat out the race. I think it's about 8 million voted for Trump and about 4.5 million sat out. So what had happened? Well, the people had seen themselves, their family, their friends lose homes, not get bailed out, and see the banks get bailed out. Among other issues too. This Obamacare came in. Yes, some people benefited from that, but a lot of people did not. And a lot of people are now paying a fifth, 25% of their income for health care, right?
Sure,
we have, yes, Obamacare did lower the uninsured rate, but it drastically expanded the underinsured rate, which you get to the point there's really no difference then between being uninsured and underinsured, in terms of if you have to pay $12,000 a year out of pocket for health care and you're making $40,000 a year, how are you going to do that? So there's, those people in urban areas and in rural.
Yeah, and again, sorry about that, but the one thing, like you're saying, rural areas have a lot of support for you. It makes sense. I mean, it's not a lot. It's not a line, like you say. It's not just one singular plane. It's a whole spectrum, and it makes sense that a lot of issues that the Green Party stands for benefit a lot of rural people. And I think those issues, like, that's starting to come to light a little bit. I think more people are being receptive because both parties aren't really helping them. We're about to likely head into a recession here in 2 weeks now, and I think there's just there is a path to success for third parties. We'll get into that in a little bit. I have little bit more of a local question. All of this, it's been an issue, yes, but also you've gotten great publicity, like you said, because I feel like everyone's fairly sympathetic to you. That's not. I've seen some of the Twitter. Twitter's not a good indication, but everybody, because they're all. But I think listening to some of your interviews, people are very supportive and empathetic to your issue and your situation. So how much do you think this will help your candidacy? Because, honestly, just candidly, a third party's not likely to win anytime soon anywhere, which, honestly, for me, I would like to see some of them win. But I just don't think it's going to happen, at least this cycle. So how do you think this is going to help your candidacy? And also, how much do you think this is going to hurt Democrats in North Carolina?
Yeah, it certainly can hurt us too. We can be kept off the ballot. We could lose our court cases, and even if we win our court cases, again, it exhausts us, right? We have nothing else to run the last couple of months, and we haven't been campaigning, right? So it definitely hurts us, and that's the point, is to hurt us. And we could just run into the issue of that the ballot printing deadline is mid-August. If it's not resolved in the next 4 or 5 weeks, what occurs then? Will we be able to get a court to hold the presses on the ballots? You know what I mean? So there is a lot of danger here for us, but there's also opportunity. Again, it proves our point. This is why we're out here doing this, trying to build a multi-party democracy, is because the system is exclusionary and it's corrupt. And it doesn't serve the interests of working people. It doesn't serve the interests of the middle class. It doesn't serve the interests of anyone who's not connected to Wall Street or the wars, basically. So, it does help us because it allows us to really show quite clearly the evidence of the rot that underlines, pervades, and controls the system, our political system. Again, the bigger picture here is that they can use this nationally to try and scare other people from running, to try and show that, look, here's precedent that this occurred. The argument is really dangerous that they're using, that because there were irregularities, even though we've proven nothing that would indicate that you didn't make the number of signatures that you need, but because there were irregularities, there could be more, so we're not going to, right? I mean, that's basically Rudy Giuliani's arguments against Trump.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
And it really was that, like, there is this fraud. I can't tell you what it is, but there could be fraud. I mean, that's his whole argument, was there could be fraud, and all the courts he went into said this is ridiculous.
Yeah,
this is absurd. Get out of here.
It's ironic, for sure. Because sorry to interrupt, but it's just like because they had that national Democrats had a big push for like voting integrity, voting rights. They had a big legislation push, and it wasn't going to go anywhere. It did not go anywhere, but it's just a very ironic parallel to from going from there to restricting free parties to get on the ballot. It's just interesting. It's just a dynamic that's interesting and also dangerous. I mean, I don't think that anybody in the I don't think most voters in the Democratic Party can look at this and be like, oh yeah. I don't think any real Democratic voters, especially in North Carolina, look at this and be like, why would you? I mean, why? I don't think there's anything good that comes out of it for the Democrats personally. I don't think this is the way to go for them, for sure. Let's end it off here because I know you have things to do. Obviously, you have a lot of issues.
I enjoy this. I appreciate you reaching out to me, man. This is terrific.
I do have one last question. This is a little bit more national. So just with all of this and with a lot of the discontent for both parties, for everything, Congress, Mr. President Biden, everything. What do you think the timetable is for third parties to make serious shockwaves in electoral? Either as they can be spoiler candidates, or also winning congressional races or statewide races. Where do you see a timetable on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It really is. Richard Wolff, who folks aren't familiar with, Richard Wolff is a socialist economist, and I listen to his stuff every week. He's really one of the best on economics in the country. And but he reminded me of a Vladimir Lenin quote, and he's not that's not what he does, run around quoting dead revolutionaries all the time. But in this case, he did, because he was kind of talking about this, and I agree. And there's this supposedly, and I think it was Lenin, it said, decades go by and nothing happens, and then weeks go by and decades happen. And this idea that yes, it takes time. This is not going to grow out of the ground like a weed, that we have to continue to build upon what others have already done and are doing. There are plenty of people who have been doing this work for decades, and we have to continue to work. We're up against an edifice here, a leviathan that is sustained by billions of dollars, that's subservient then to an economic system that's trillions of dollars. I mean, so we have to be humble in what we're trying to do while remaining dedicated to it. This idea that somehow because we can't accomplish it in this election cycle, we could give up, that's exactly what they want. That's exactly what the system wants. The system wants you to keep this short-sighted, just on that's how they work, right? Everything for the people in the two-party system is all about the current election. Nothing long term, sure. And that's why they make these compromise decisions all the time, right? What's best for me in terms of getting the donations I need to win the next race? I mean, if we fall ourselves, if we go into that trap, then we're in the same, and we're trying to break that. We're trying to find the fissure or the crack that we can split it apart, right? So we have to remain humble about it while remaining dedicated. And as we move forward with that, understand that this will take time, but eventually that crack will begin to dramatically expand. And then it's the whole issue of, right, the whole levee will break, so to speak. So it's remaining dedicated to it. It's also, too, the other part, I'll say this continually, we cannot look at this as just a political process in and of it for itself. We cannot be a political party in of it for itself, that we have to be part of a larger movement, and that the political party must be only one arm of the larger body. And there must be other elements to this, and that the political party must always be subservient to the interests of that body, to that constituency. And that body must include things like, direct action and civil disobedience, labor organizing, mutual community aid, communications, media, so the stuff that you're doing, right? A variety of other things as well are included in that body. Those are the things to keep in mind as we move forward. And we have to build the infrastructure for it. We have to just not recruit good candidates. We have to build campaign managers. We have to build treasurers. We have to build people who know how to run campaigns, how to do media, things like that, in order to compete. And as you compete, as you get better, you attract more people. One of the goals for my campaign is that as I'm out there trying to recruit people, so we have 3 or 4 candidates running on the federal level in 2024, right? And then in 2026 we have 6 or 7 candidates running. I mean, and continuing to build, let alone at the state and local levels, right? But in order to do that, we need the infrastructure. So we also have to find the people who are willing to be the treasurers, willing to be the campaign managers, willing to do all the volunteer coordinators, all the other tasks that are necessary to run an operation like a political campaign in order to have an impact on the race. And then, the idea is threefold, right? So you build the campaign or build the party, as part of a larger movement. You then put pressure on the existing corporate parties to take on some of your issues. We've seen that we're successful from like the 1880s to the 1920s with the Populist Party, the People's Party, right? The Progressive Party, the Socialist Party, where issues, particularly say with labor,
for sure,
workday,
easily,
were taken on by the Democrats and Republicans because that's what these threats were espousing. And then finally, the third aspect is you run candidates continually in a two-party structure. It's going to break the structure. So we keep having these races where there are more than 2 candidates. It's going to break the structure, and the 2 parties, the 2 corporate parties, are going to see that and understand that, and then they will switch to ranked choice voting, and eventually we'll get to proportional representation. But this is all going to take time and dedication. We got to remain humble with it, but we just keep going forward because we know this is what's necessary.
Yeah, a lot of moves to make. I like that you're patient with it. You understand that you can't be done overnight. I think it's a good sign for the future. Hopefully you get on the ballot. I don't know what the process is looking like there, but hopefully we see you on the ballot in November. If you guys want to support the Hoh campaign, where can they find you online?
Yeah, thank you for that. It's Matthew Hoh for Senate.org. Last name spelled H-O-H. Please go there if you agree with what I'm saying, if you understand the fight that we're in, that we are up against the Democratic Party machine here, the Democratic Party machine. Please support us. We are in a David versus Goliath fight here. Again, we're up against Leviathan. This is a fight worth having. I'm excited for this fight, and this is a fight that is of national significance, and we need people's help. So if you can donate, please donate, and please encourage other people to donate.
Yeah, and we will put all the links to your social media, to your website, anything, in the description of this episode. You guys know where to find us. We're not going to go through that today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for coming on, Mr. Hoh. This is a fun one. Hopefully everything is resolved, and we see you on the ballot in November. I'm Eshan Pokhrel, and goodbye.